So thank you so much, Mr. Yao, for allowing me to interview you today. Tell us your full name and your occupation, please.
Okay, my name is Adam Yao. Uh, I'm a senior business analyst, and I work in the computer application area. Uh, I'm currently working for Thermo Fisher Scientific. Uh, yeah.
Okay. Where were you born?
Uh, I was born on December 2nd, 1960. I'm 62 years old. Uh, yeah.
Where?
I was born in Beijing, China,
Uh-huh.
mainland. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And when did you move to Houston?
Uh, yeah, I came to Houston in 1992 toward the year end. So it's a good 30 years.
30
Almost,
years.
almost there. So it's a
Did
long
you
time.
did you come here to study or did you come here to uh, visit?
I came here to actually join my wife, and she started work here in Houston. And I came here. Actually, I was running a business back in China at that time. So I kind of took the business here and tried to carry it carry it on. But later on, the course changed, and then I started to go to school to study.
Right. Do you mind telling us what business were you running in China and in the
Oh,
beginning
it
of the
was a
United States?
yeah, it was a trading business that actually import the U.S. made oil and gas equipment to
Oh,
China. Actually, I was one of the a dealer of Halliburton, which is actually Houston-based business. That's why when I came over, I still kind of continuing the line of a business for a couple of years.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
And when did you go back to school?
That's 2 years later, like back in 1995, 1994. So I joined the MBA program of the University of Houston, B School. So
Uh-huh.
that's where I spent a little bit over 2 years and to get an MBA degree and start work. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, here in the States.
Why are you making the change? Why did you decided to do that?
Well, like back in the 80s and the 90s, that's kind of a very dramatic changing period or transition period of mainland China, right? So it started after quite several decades of kind of closed the door communist control, and then it started to open door in the early 80s, and so um, I was a I graduated and like back in '83 from college there locally, so and started work and spent about 10 years different jobs for government, and the private business sector started to open up, and so that's why I lately in toward the end I was involved in the trading business and kind of created my own little trading firm, and with 5 employees, and so it's a pretty good endeavor there, but the overall the society back then is just still pretty enclosed, and we don't know well through the trading business, it started see through um, what the outside world is, and in particular the United States and the Western world, is this kind of a very uh, interesting to my generation, right? So we've been grown up in a very enclosed environment and cultural background and political oppression there. So it's a pretty tough childhood for us, and then grow up into a brand new era that the doors start open and you can peek outside. So coming out to see the world is kind of internal desire there that we had. Like my wife went to uh, the state and to study and to continue education and find a job here. And so that's kind of a just like a gold rush, if yes you may, that for young generation of Chinese at that time in the 80s and 90s and start to come out. And so that's kind of the driving force there.
I see. So could you talk about a little bit, sorry, can you talk a little bit about your childhood? Because you said it was pretty
Yeah,
tough childhood.
right. I think I was born in '60s and grown up like into teen in '70s and '80s and before the adulthood and the China was that's the period of great cultural revolution, right? So
Correct.
that the Communist Party has been ruled the country with a very iron fist and a very high pressure on people on society, and so freedom is really luxurious uh, at that time. So the childhood was pretty difficult, if you may, and we have food shortages. And our parents, in particular, my parents are they call it intellectuals, and that's pretty much the target of the communist uh, power to try to oppress and to stop the free thought of freedom or freedom of thoughts kind of proliferate, and then that will threaten their control and their regime. So the great cultural revolution is pretty much targeting on those my parent generation, as they were sent uh, to the countryside, to the camps, and
Mhm.
so I grew up without my parents. In particular, during my middle school age, that's when actually earlier than that, 1968, I was 8 year old. Both my parents were sent out to the countryside, and they came back. It's already 1975. So that kind of a period where we're kind of grow up by ourselves, and
Mhm. But
we
you were, who take care of you? Who took
my
care of you?
grandmother, my
Your
grandmother,
grandmother in
yeah,
Beijing?
in Beijing, yeah. So
Uh,
my parents made a decision not to take me and my sister with them to the countryside, and so and my grandma's still in Beijing, so we grew up without uh, mom and dad directly taking care of us. But that's a great uh, period of time that we learn how to be independent much earlier and get mature mentally uh, and try to solve problem in a harsh time by ourselves. And so that prepared us with a pretty strong mental strength there. And I think it benefits our endeavor later on when we left the country and facing
mhm,
the cultural challenges and all the learning
mhm,
everything from scratch and a
mhm,
totally different system and a totally different cultural background. I think that
mhm.
childhood was tough, but it doesn't. It did prepare us with a lot of mental strength.
Mhm. Would you say your grandparents
Hmm.
had more influence on you than your parents during those formative years?
Oh, definitely. My grandmother was had a great and tremendous influence on my mentality and my personality and my moral value. And she's a great lady. She's on my mother's side, and she's a widower and kind of raised me and my sister, and also my cousins on my mother's side, and this is a group of kids actually grow together. It's pretty tough,
Mhm,
but she's illiterate. She doesn't read. She doesn't. She grows from a very old time, even before the national customer, right? She was born back in Qing Dynasty, so it's a pretty old school,
wow.
and actually she had a uh, wrapped foot.
Oh, food
Yeah.
bounding?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So, so you think about a little lady like that had showed us a very strong will to take on challenges, no matter how difficult it is.
Wow.
And she taught us how to, well, a lot of the living basic skills like cooking, washing, and cleaning, and try with a limited material supply, and how to make ourselves sufficient and surviving. So those surviving skills, even those carried us over to the U.S. a lot of times. And of course, um, be industrial, be strong-willed, and be frugal too at the same time, and learn how to budget life. And all these things are passed along from grandmother.
Yeah.
Really benefit me a lot. Yeah.
Can you tell me an example or one incident that your grandmother uh,
Yeah.
educate
Uh,
you or install the value in you? Just tell me one incident.
well, I have a multiple cousins from my mother's sisters, right? They all
Mhm.
live in Beijing together. Um, I'm the only boy among six girls. So,
You're the
so
you're the prince.
well, while grandmother really focused on me a lot, but he also uh, he's also very strict on me, and try to always, well, there's a lot of incidents that, that's 8 year old or 6 or 8 year old young boy, and do a lot of crazy things and amongst the girls, but one thing she taught me is that when the younger cousin had a trouble, I need to stand up for them, and
Oh.
as a man, and
Mm.
a lot of case. Uh, I remember one little cousin was injured at a kindergarten, and so uh,
Mhm.
grandma just say, "Hey, rush over and take care whatever you need to take care of. You're the only man at that point in time. It's an emergency, and you gotta step up. Even though my older sister can do well with that, but grandma picked me
Mhm.
and say, "Hey."
Wow.
So that uh, kind of very typical incident that
Yeah.
she used it to teach me as a man
Yes.
of the household, and
Yes.
you need to do what you need to do.
Right.
So,
Right.
hmm
Right. So tell me another instant that's the happy memories during
oh, the happy
childhood.
memories. And my mom is a great cook, and the supply was pretty terrible at that time in northern part of China. It depends on years. You may have a bad years and no harvest, and you just see very obviously a shortage of food. But my
Mhm.
grandma was very, very clever and a very good cook, and I remember just the cooking the cabbage, and her cabbage just always tasted better than our neighbors. And so the kids kind of run over and say, "Hey, um, can you spare some of your grandmother's either cake or cabbages? Cabbages is very hard to cook and to make it tasty, but it was a tasty." And she knows, and also she knows how to budget, with the limited, with a lot of food shortage and rationing, like 10 eggs for a whole family, and how to
Mhm.
use those 10 eggs. That's the only protein and we had, and just for a whole month, and for a
Mhm.
family of 7 or 8 people
Mhm.
there. So she managed okay, and make us nutrition. And I'm uh, actually today I cook for my house, and a lot of the basic skills are passed down by grandma.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So despite the hardship and difficulties that your grandmother's gives you so much
Yep.
care and warmth, all you can remember is her cooking and how she
Yeah.
helped you to uh, have responsibility for the household, and that's a really amazing childhood you had.
Yep.
Can you tell me one instant that was like really challenging and upsetting for you during those period of time before your parents came back? That was, you had fought with the neighbors or something? I'm sure there's a lot. Just tell me one.
Well, I think leaving parents are very difficult
Yeah,
for a young child.
8 years old. Yeah,
Yeah,
those are the time you
but you
need the
know,
parents.
but you know what? That at the train station, I see my mom off. All right, so
Uh-huh.
and it's crowded, and then thousand people are sitting. Family are separated, and you see people weeping and crying, and
Mhm.
very, very, very tough situation mentally, right? But
Mhm.
somehow, uh, I don't remember what did I do, but I came back home, and grandma kind of said, "Hey, you're a little man already. You didn't
Mhm.
cry in front of your
Mhm.
mom."
Mhm. Mhm.
But when I got home, I started to cry.
Mhm.
Then grandma said, "Hey, you're a little man. You show some strength there, and not to
Mhm.
cry in front of your mom, seeing her off, give her the comfort."
Mhm.
I think that's
Mhm.
a uh,
Mhm.
pretty significant moment.
Yes, yes, yes. So your parents, even though they didn't influence directly, but their absence has a huge
Right.
influence on your upbringing. Yeah.
Right. I think at the train station, I still clear vividly recall that moment that my
Mhm.
heart hurts, but I
Of
just
course.
I just I just feel letting tear down is not a men thing. I think it's just that's a
Mhm.
part of the culture too, right? Men, like
Right.
I earlier said, men was given a lot of uh, burden or charge that
Mhm.
you need to behave strong. You need to
Right.
mentally be willing uh, to influence whoever around you, right? So
Yeah.
I think being at 8 years old, then it's a pretty profound. I mean,
Yeah, you were only 8. You had to grow up really
yeah,
fast to be a
right,
little big man at 8 years
right,
old. So that is the experience of your parents' absence was really
right,
um, a strong, a strong influence on your life. Yeah.
right.
Um, so how about your current family? I mean, you have sons or one
Yeah,
wife, I assume.
right. Yeah, we have a family of four. I have two sons, and one is working um, and study, or already graduated from college and continue pursuing medical education, and meanwhile working. The younger son is going to college this fall,
Mhm. Majoring what?
majoring in computer science.
Oh,
So
great. Yes, like you.
so actually, I uh, start off as a accountant. My MBA major is in accounting. My college major back in China was the economics. So
Uh-huh.
uh, so I've been in the financial world for quite a while,
I
and
see.
including running the business and doing the marketings and key bookings. I'm a one people company, right? So they
Right.
do a lot of things and then deal with the business. And so my family came here, um, and the both sons are born here in Houston, and it's it start off a very struggling, right? And I have to I think I have a I run in the business at the end of the business uh, cannot continue because I was on petition for green card. Actually, You probably heard of the June 4th, the Tiananmen Square
Yes, I do. I do.
incident. That's what Bush government granted the Chinese young students
Oh, I see.
the permanent residency, right?
I
So
see.
that is why uh, my wife was already graduated and pretty determined to settle. We are facing uh, this kind of either I continue to do business or come here to join to make a family. So I decided to come, and
Uh-huh.
meanwhile we have that kind of a special occasion to get the residency here in the state
Mm-hmm.
through that special grant from Bush government. I mean the first
Right.
Bush government. So
Right.
uh, so
So
it's
did your
kind of
wife come
opportunity.
first? Your
Yeah,
wife came here first?
yeah, she came here right what 3 months after Tiananmen Square
Uh-huh.
incident, and then that's
89.
so yeah, 89, yes, and she went to University of Maryland,
Mm-hmm. What was her
and
major?
she was a chemist.
I
She was
see.
in chemistry and also environmental protection,
Wow.
the kind of environmental science field. So that's
Wow.
yeah. So that's how we got here, and there's a lot of different bits and pieces together. But we came here, even though I run a business line, but still in its infancy, and without being able to leave the country at that time, and because I was on a visa petition, so I cannot leave, and the business started, yes, in 2 years at a time. It started kind of go downwards. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so my wife started off her first job, a very low paid job at that time. So we're kind of a poor people here.
Mm-hmm. So your
But
wife still, what does she do right now?
oh, she later on turned to IT field too, and being a programmer and
I see.
and computer analyst and business analyst, and yeah, now she's retired. Um, I
Mm,
think
I see.
our life has started with a not a very uh, uh, not very solid grounds financially, right? So we have to fund ourselves. We don't have no family here, not many friends, and not a community per se, and to latch on to search for help and for guidance and a lot of things. You just have to learn it yourself. I think back to my childhood growth, and that really laid some solid ground and skill set for us, my wife alike, and we grew up in a similar situation, and so uh, challenge and financial burden and difficulty is is not that difficult to face to to change, and that's actually the driving force for us to change ourselves and quickly adapt it to society. I think that melt yourself into the society around you. It's challenging. It's really tough and sometimes depressing.
Did you still feel that way?
Uh, Not anymore. I think
Not anymore.
no. I think professionally we progressed pretty good, and overall, looking back, I have to say our hearts are filled more with appreciation rather than bad feeling. And so we do have a bad moments, right? So don't know anybody, and even go to school, and start work and schooling at the same time, full time work and full time study. I worked 3 jobs while I was in an MBA program just to try to footing the funds, and um, so I've been a Pizza Hut delivery boy and waiters, and I do 2 restaurants, and also do court translator. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
it's this dramatic period of, like in the mid '90s until I graduate and find the first professional job, and then it is great struggle and experience, and that's really toughen your spirit and make you um, feel that this world is different as long as you work hard and you get paid off, and
Mhm.
we don't have time to complain really. Just just spirit ahead, and then I remember 1995, 96 spring, and that's where I graduated. Um, Before I graduated, I got a job offer, and to me, that's the campus recruit, and I was picked by three oil companies, and Shell, ExxonMobil, and Phillips. Uh, so finally, I go with the Shell oil, and I was extremely thrilled at that time that I get a uh, the job offer, and the process is just so warming. I mean,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
that you you never experience that kind of the equality between the employer and the employee. Uh, that you're on the same footing, and pretty much you two-way choice here. It's not that I
So
can
you
choose.
mean
I can
this?
choose. Yeah,
You mean
I can.
that's the United States,
Yeah,
that the way the relationship between employee and employer, it's
yeah,
much more e-balanced than in China,
right.
where it's like top
You
downs,
Right. It's a hierarchical, right? So
right?
here it's a free platform, and you got a three. I got a three job choice here. Just that
Mhm.
one time, and maybe I'm the lucky one, but before that, I do see it's hard to be a pizza deliverer boy, and then you're trying to make ends meet, and that job
Mhm.
doesn't really uh, give you a whole lot pride or not financial sufficiency. Uh, but uh, the first the job offer came, and really uh, give me such a pleasure that you're like a farmer that after a great period of winter and sowing and planting and fix the land and
Yeah,
whatever. That was hard work, and
pays
in the
off.
autumn that you see the golden harvest, and
Mhm.
that's something uh, really uh, uh, make me so appreciating uh, what this piece of land and this community can offer me.
Mhm. Yes. Um, so yeah, you were saying you don't feel, you feel, you said earlier, you said melting in a society, it's
Mm.
hard, but you
Yep.
don't feel that way anymore. So what make the change?
Well, the it still have a different level of a struggle, right? So now you're financially more sound, and you can pay much more attention to your surroundings and differences. And uh, I think I'm pretty. I do like to observe, and curiosity has accompanied me through childhood until being an adult. Um, and be curious about what this society is about, and travel around. When you have money, you can tour around this country, right? So you start to
Mhm.
see the greatness of the nature and the greatness of the build of this country. And ethnically, you're exposed to a lot of different people. I remember I went to uh, uh, one McDonald restaurant, and stand in the line. There's a guy, and just to kind of jam into in the line, and place the order, and in front of me, and so I was pretty angry, and said, hey, this is not fair. You should stand behind the line. And so But the guy said, "Hey, go back to where you come from," and with the cursing words, and I was pretty shocked. And that was when I was still at school, right? So, and it's a mentally setback, right? So I say, okay, but I do have a lot of opportunities and happenings that happen the opposite. And while I was being a delivery boy, I knock the door. I see all kinds of customers, right? So black, white, or yellow, you name it. And I see uh, great mentality and a great hospitality and kindness and
Mm,
also tolerance. I think this is what
mhm.
I observed. Well, doing like I said, yeah, I got my first professional job, but I look at those low level jobs I did, like waiters, pizza delivery, and
And then let me stop you for a second. So you
mhm,
said that when you were delivering pizza, you encounter all kinds of people, all kinds of
yeah,
color,
yeah,
and you see the tolerance and the kindness of the other people. Can you
exactly.
give me just one incident that's most memorable?
Uh, I think one incident is that during the pizza delivery, your busiest season is or time of the day or month or the year round is around those ball games, like
Mm-hmm.
like a 95, 90, 94, and
Mm-hmm.
those are the 2 years of Houston Rockets and being a
Mm-hmm.
national champion in a row. So the Clutch City is. I don't have the money and the time to sit at home to watch games, but I can through my pizza box. When the game starts and nobody cook, right? So
Right.
I I got a 30 box, just one trip, and probably 10 household, and you knock the door, you will hear the sound from the TV and
Uh-huh.
all the craziness and the screams and the people. The last box of the pizza is already
Cold.
cold,
Yes.
but guess what? I got the best tip.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
guy came out and said, "Boy, I've been there too."
No, that is touching. Yeah.
That made me cry.
Yeah.
Even now, I still cry just thinking about that guy. Uh, it's it's touching,
Yes. The generosity of strangers.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's a very very good experience. Even though I later on I got professional job, I look at those low level stuff I did at the bottom of the society. You just feel that the the channel is open. This is a
Right.
free world. What free world would offer you? So
Yes.
I do
Yes.
cherish that. Yeah.
Can you tell me one incident
Hmm.
of this kind of same feeling after you become professional, that you don't have this low paying job, your current job, any incident that makes you feel heartwarming, warming feeling?
Well, then it's very um, mm, I would say it's a upward hill to climb since then, and you have a different level of responsibilities, and you have a different chances to show your capability and use your skill and use your knowledge and use your particularly use your skill set to maneuver within different communities, and work is a community and living environment is a community. So how uh, I started kind of appreciating more American value or American dream. I still recall the first job with the Shell Oil, the employee orientation. Actually, it's the whole Royal Dutch for every half year. all the new hires from global will fly to Houston
Mhm.
and gather at the Shell Oil golf resort. And
Mhm.
you can bring your wife, you can bring your
Mhm.
family in there,
Mhm.
and even the
Mhm.
resort and the CEOs, and will give you open speech and tell you what Shell Oil is, or
Mhm.
what's the ethics of
Mhm.
what's the value of this enterprise. That
Mhm.
is something totally new, but it's
Mhm.
really opened up. You understand what's the corporate culture here, or what's uh, the entrepreneurship or
Mhm.
individualism that of this society,
Mhm.
and particular in the business world. And back to my business practice in China, that was totally different at that time,
Mhm.
and still from the traditional Chinese culture, the business practice always is often looked at upon because Chinese always say "wu shang bu jian," means
Mhm.
the business practices are not ethical at all the
Yes.
time. So,
Yes.
but here to the state, I'm not trying to beautify it, but it's different philosophy here and different
Mhm.
ethical value. So from the very get-go, that first employee orientation, there's this Deer Park Refinery foreman
Mhm.
in his late 50s, probably early uh,
Mhm.
60s, and it kind of give us their his own experience
Mhm.
as the beginning. Uh, Immediately after CEO's open speech, and
Mhm.
there's a foreman, there's an old worker coming and
Mhm.
talk to all the new employees, including a lot of PhDs, masters, and scientists, and all different levels. And
Mhm.
but that kind of contrast is the one CEO at the top of the pyramid and the one
Right.
worker at the bottom. You see, that's a lot of culture shock here. I say, why? What a contrast! And then after that old guy says that, hey, boys and girls, and I'm your example. I'm your example of American dream.
Mhm.
I started with Sheldon, 17 years old, after barely just graduated from high school, and I
Mhm.
started work here. And through this past 4 years with the Charlotte, and now I have a home, I have a wife, 5 kids, and I have a vacation home at Galveston Port,
Mhm.
and I have a boat. I have $2 million in my cash account, and
Mhm.
I have a pension. And this is the way to go, boys and girls, and follow me. And the Shell will
Mhm.
treat you all right as long as you
Mhm.
work hard. So that's kind of a witness, and at that moment I thought, wow, American dream come true to me as long as I
Mhm.
stay with this.
Mhm. And you believe that you still feel the
Yeah,
same way.
well, my dream was a sweet for only less than 5 years. I'm just say, man,
What
Randy.
happened? What
Well,
happened?
well, 5 years is where I can enter pension program. That's the Shell rule at that time, and back in
Ah,
19, but uh, yeah, I joined 96 and 2000.
mhm.
The Shell pension program terminated
Oh.
right before I can start enter that tenure. But
Mhm.
then it's replaced with this thing called a 401k.
Right, 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 right.
For those years, I don't need to pay anything for insurance, but uh, since 2000, I started paying premium and to buy insurance, they call it PPO or HPO or something
Right,
like
right.
that. I said, wait a minute,
Yes.
something doesn't sound right. A little different from what I heard
Yeah.
the
But
first days.
in general, you still feel this American
Yeah,
dream is true.
it's true.
That if
It's
you
it's
work
vivid.
hard, it's if you work hard and you put in
You'll
your
get
time,
rewarded.
you get
You will get
rewarded. You
rewarded.
still feel it's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. I
Yeah,
still feel true. And even
yeah.
that, after I was kind of a little disappointed with the Shell, and then another opportunity come out, and it's called a Y2K, and
Hmm.
every company, every individual and have to update their computer system, right? Because the
Right.
2000 years turn that there's a bug. So that drives a whole, and also not far behind is the internet boom, and
Hmm.
so whole information system industry
Hmm.
evolves and explode actually. So that kind of create a tidal wave, drive a lot of people like me and my wife, and switch from business field or uh, whatever scientific field we involved or engineering field we involved, and go into the
So
IT side. So
you changed one more time after
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. What
yeah,
year was it?
yeah, definitely.
What year was it?
Oh, it's 2000.
2000. Okay,
Yeah,
right around then. You
right.
changed one more
Right,
time.
right.
Yeah.
That also reveals a fact, and that the society is totally open. I mean, in the business world, it's that um, it provides opportunities to uh, to workers as long as you
Mhm.
work. And well, talking in the back about the feeling of being minority and ethnically you're a minority for fact, and in the workplace you do um, see networks or nepotism, and which is totally understandable because we're from we Chinese are from a most typical society of nepotism. so, uh,
So that kind of situation is okay for you because that's also happening in China.
yes,
You do
and
not feel it's unfair because it
I do
should not happen. You do feel unfair.
I
Tell me.
do I do feel unfair. Even now I progressed on my career to a very senior level. Uh, but I see a lot of my colleagues and or same Chinese countrymen and work together in the same company, different companies. We have our communities and see them struggling, um, not progress as uh, their progression doesn't necessarily match their level of effort. So
Mhm.
that is that is a pity, and you have opposite example like say power of alumni, and is to say which school you're from and who is it who is the powerful guy and where he graduated from. That matters. Like say in all these big companies in Texas, you have U, UT column, you have A&M column, you have the UH column, blah 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 blah. You just thinking about that. So those are things are necessary, but it is not bias free, right? So just put it short, and then look at nowadays the IT field, and you will see very very ethnic, uh, distinctive, if you may. So you
Can
can
you
see
explain a little more? What does
well,
that
there's a
mean?
there's a probably one group of ethnic groups that dominate that field,
Which is?
which is like like a computer engineering and information systems, and you will see because this is a lot of go with the globalization and offshoring, right? So you know, going offshore means your a lot of uh, your information system hardware, software, and support, and human resources are sourced from Asia, for example, either from China or India, and you see a
Mhm.
lot of those things. And now, not even that, and so you see now business management and all kinds of industrial fields or business fields are particularly at managerial level, you see outsourcing is so frequent and so popular, if you may, and that make certain group or certain people from certain area more benefited, uh, which it's hard to say it's a fair or not. A lot of capitalism is benefit driven and is
Right.
profit driven.
Right.
Cost matters. So,
Yeah.
uh, but that does create a lot of problem. And you look at today's American society, you look at the division uh, at ethnic lines is pretty darn obvious.
Mm-hmm.
If you may, that kind of conflict or that kind of a bad feeling of
Mm-hmm.
unfairness
Mm-hmm.
is true, is existing. At least
Mm-hmm.
how biased it is another matter, but it does draw those lines. But
Mm-hmm.
my hunch is this society is still most tolerating
Mm-hmm.
society in the whole globe.
Mm-hmm.
At least all the countries I went through, I
Mm-hmm.
experienced and either traveled or worked. Uh, there's no single place or country that's
Mm-hmm.
even comparable
Mm-hmm.
to as for tolerance,
Mm-hmm.
fairness,
Mm-hmm.
and mutual care and mutual appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just like what I talked about my pizza delivery experience with the cold pizza get most tips. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's something
Mm-hmm.
I don't see at least anywhere else. That thing
Mm-hmm.
can happen, or um, actually in my life here, that's not the only incident or occurrence. There's a lot of many other things that
Mm-hmm.
uh, it shows that people's decency is not from class, is not
Mm-hmm.
from uh, how much you make or
Mm-hmm.
how higher class in the social
Mm-hmm.
hierarchy you are. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I see that's the comparison. Is there a problem? Obvious. There are still
Mm-hmm.
problems. Are there conflict? Yes, there are
Mm-hmm.
conflicts, but that's how I see this. It's still a a dreamland for me from being a minority and can yet still enjoy uh,
Mm-hmm.
fair treatment
Mm-hmm.
and a relatively fair legal system and a
Mm-hmm.
fair cultural system too. And we're
Mm-hmm.
here talking about culture and um, as a hobbyist of Beijing opera, and I
Mm-hmm.
just see a lot of tolerance from my friends, and I have in my company. There's a lot of colleagues and of other ethnic groups, and they're musicians too, and we
Mm-hmm.
can talk. I mean, this thing you go back to China, I doubt it. So
I just want to make a tiny bit of observation here because
hmm
you've been away from China for a long time,
right,
and Chinese society has changed quite a bit too,
true.
and I think that and you grew up during the time that is really difficult, really poor, so
hmm
people cannot even handle themselves economically. How could they be helpful to other? And politically, it was so bad. The Cultural Revolution was really killed a lot of people's conscience and a lot of and so I mean, right now I think China might be different. I'm just pointing that out. It might be different. That's a little bit better society, maybe. But that's
But
just my observation.
yes, you're right, and that that's totally two different era we're talking about, the historical
Exactly.
era in the past 40 years, and it's it's totally contrasting, and
Mm-hmm.
the society changed a lot, and I would say a great productivity has been inspired, and with great help of uh, America, you cannot never downplayed. Even now, the Sino-American relationship has went pretty sour recently, but you still politics aside, and the influence of American culture, that is the the ground that is the key driving force that opened up the China society and let China's culture start to transform too.
You are so right. You are so right. Yeah.
I think that's and I know we'll say the Americans and Chinese are two great people. Before you jump to that, you have to there are differences there, and yeah, Chinese are great people, no doubt about it. It's like any other mankind, they're all great, but great people live at a different footing. That's the unfairness, but that's the reality. This world has never been even. It's always different. But what can make the difference stay together is the humanity, is the culture that, just like the pizza delivery case, it's that kind of culture will be the positive driving force.
Yeah, you are so right.
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying there's a great Chinese who really realize this, and the great politicians, and 40 years ago, and being drawn rather than to Soviet culture, but being drawn to the Western side, particularly symbolized by Americans, right? So, we came out of there and here get educated, but we have all kinds of contact and trace back and send back all our philosophies we learned here, our life experiences, and you're not the first one to listen to me talk to this, and many other experiences, American experiences, brought back in the past 40 years to China. That shift and transformed the next generation to a certain extent, of course.
Right.
And there's other inputs, and there's other influences, and mutually too. And the culture came out, really enriched this society too. You look at the Chinese history in America, in probably past the two centuries, and with the growth of America, and it transformed a lot, right? So nowadays, this is like the first I came here to look at Houston Chinatown, just by the George Convention Center. Now it's non-existing. A brand new Chinatown already in birth, right? So, and still expanding, and you have your own landmark building, and here at Belair Street, and so that's unthinkable by the time I came here, and that also brought a lot of China value here. I think the good, both sides of the good part meet together. That's what we want. But I don't think a culture, we can measure culture as a good or bad, is that they are different. And there are some values, and the difference often may cause conflict too.
Right. But like you said, that what brings this together is the humanity, right?
Exactly.
We are all human beings, and our difference is actually not as great as less than our similarities. Our similarities are greater than our differences.
Right.
So if we can acknowledge that we can move together.
Definitely. Yeah. You're exactly right. I think difference is not necessarily bad, and it's good. It's often proved to be good, and
it's actually good. Well, I was so sad that the McDonald's opened up at the first shop in Taiwan. That was terrible. Nobody wants to eat traditional Chinese street food anymore. They want to go to McDonald's. It was terrible.
More terrible thing is now you have a Panda Express.
Oh, right, the other side, the other side, right?
Yeah.
Well, Adam, I know you through Chinese Opera Club, so I'd like to
Mhm.
ask you a few questions on Chinese Opera
Sure.
Club.
Mhm.
So when did you start your Chinese opera training?
I think when I was 5 or 6 years old, and my wife, my father was a fan of Beijing opera, including my grandpa, and they all. When I was very little, my grandpa would say, "Hey, I'm so proud of that. I watched Dr. Mei Lanfang's performance in Rio."
Wow.
Back, yeah. So, and he would say he spent a lot of money catch a train to Shanghai from Nanjing to Shanghai to
Uh-huh.
just to go to see Mei Lanfang perform.
Right.
Yeah. So. Um, that kind of thing is just from when I was a very little, and of course, we have what is that? Um, Gramophone?
Mhm.
Is it the turntable
Record.
thing? Yeah,
Record.
the record, the turntable. And when I
Yeah.
was a little, I learned how to put the needle on the black thing and the
Yeah.
thing turn, and you will hear all these Beijing opera playing, and also famous like Mei Lanfang, Ma Linliang, all these famous uh, characters and artists, and so that's my exposure,
Mm-hmm.
musical exposure, if you may, when I was little, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, back in the 40s and the 50s, and right by the time, I think Chinese opera entered its prime and golden age, right at the time before the communists and nationalists changed hands of
Mm-hmm.
of mainland
Mm-hmm.
China, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where the most prosperous. So born in the 60s and 70s, even though they already start to, the communists already start to try to get rid of this traditional culture aspect
Well, Cultural
of
Revolution
China.
is not until 66, right?
Right. So I kind of I think in my blood those early childhood exposure to uh, the Beijing opera plays, and through passion of my father and my grandfather, that lays down the ground. And so at the 6, I think that's I remember my father is a violin, a Chinese violin player, right?
Oh,
So
really? He
yeah, he
plays
he
Western violin?
no, he plays the Jinghu, the
Oh,
Chinese,
Jingfu.
yeah,
Okay.
the
Erhu,
Chinese,
Erhu.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he plays that, and he started teaching me, and then he find very famous uh, Jinghu player. Uh, he's a professional. He's a very famous, and he plays for uh, the most renowned Hualian character, the face painting character called Qiu Shengrong, as the Qiu Pai.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the top gun of the professionals. So Mr. Wang Xiansheng, so he taught me. He kind of opened me up and then to give me the very basic training.
When you
Uh,
were what age
when I was
were
6 years
you?
old,
You were 6 years old. You start
yeah,
playing. Yeah.
yeah, I
Okay.
started playing and started get training on those,
Mm-hmm.
and until I was 12 years old, it was due
Wow.
into Cultural Revolution, and then uh, my teacher died in '75, but before that he started to be sick, and also he was persecuted
Sure.
by the Cultural Revolution movement, and all these traditional Beijing opera artists
Mm-hmm.
been either sent to prison, or they
Mm-hmm.
are not allowed to perform no more
Right.
on the stage. So
So you were practicing, you study your training in
hmm
Erhu, Jingfu.
yeah,
Were you able to see the real show on
yeah,
stage?
Yes,
Was
yes,
it
I still
common
remember.
then?
Yes,
Was it
very common.
common?
It was
So,
common. It's a mainstream. You would call it, yeah. Even though movies, theater, movie theater, and uh, TV was not there yet in
sure.
'60, but radio broadcasting is getting much more popular. The regular families in the cities can afford to buy a radio set and a record player like the gramophone.
Hmm.
Uh, so those are the main, but the Western art are still not that popular. It's the traditional Chinese stage performance art and local operas, including Beijing opera, right? And many different kinds, Bangzi, Kunqu, and
Hmm.
all these different operas at
So
different
you
locations.
do every day? You can see it every day or once a
I
week
can, yeah,
or
no, every day. Well, plus my father plays it every day, and he's a doctor. But
no?
after
Yeah, but
work, he just depends.
I'm thinking about the show. Can you go see the
Oh,
theater the
show,
show?
yes, theater is open every day,
Every day you can go
every
to
night. You can go. I can
where do they perform in the theater or do they perform in
theater. The theater.
local like
Local is only
outdoor?
outdoor is mostly the fan club. They play at in those public parks
Uh-huh.
or the street circles, and
Uh-huh.
so it's more like for self entertaining or practice
Uh-huh.
or
Sure.
just a yeah, it's a more like voluntarily public entertaining. Okay,
Right.
so put it that way, and it's
Uh-huh.
more fan based and fan play, fans play, and the fans enjoy and watching.
Uh-huh.
The audience are. I think Beijing opera is a kind of a unique to China society, and it's a story, it's a stage settings, it's been embedded or planted to the general public population because you don't have nothing else, and then the movie theater is still pretty expensive to go,
Right. Right.
uh, and it's not that popular. You still have a more Beijing opera theaters than the
Hmm.
movie theaters at
Right.
that time. I remember even prior Cultural Revolution, and I can easily find it.
So how many theaters are there?
Oh, in Beijing is
Uh-huh.
it's kind of
That
a
that
that's the capital of it. So there are many of those, and
so
there are many professional, more than anywhere, more professional troops that compete actually. You
right.
know, they stage differently. They stage at the same time. Sometimes it's hard to choose. Okay, this guy, say, is a son of a Mei Lanfang, and the other side is probably son of a Ma Lianliang. There's all these famous character and schools
Hmm.
of performance. They have a vast. They themselves is a school, and they pass it on to their through their own student.
Hmm.
It's most like private school, right? So
Right. Right.
you
Right.
uh, uh, it's a 师傅 master versus
Hmm.
student type
Hmm.
of
Disciple.
passing disciple. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the those things are clearly followed by a vast mass of audiences, and who
Hmm.
really knows just guys like my father, my grandfather. They grow up with these things, so
And so
they
are you able to see that? Were you able to see that a lot when you were
I
little?
vaguely remember those time my dad took me to the theater,
Hmm.
and I don't have to pay for the tickets,
Right.
so kids are free. So, and my father, I remember my father bought the ticket, and not front row, but at the
Hmm.
pretty back of the
Hmm.
theater. But I can run all the way just to the stage, and
Hmm. You
I
can,
still vividly, I can stand there and just watch the characters and play and fight and sing and all these things. So that's kind of like you go to circus, right?
right, 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 right,
So
right, right.
that's
It's
my
pretty
early,
cool.
yeah, that's my early recollection of exposure to the stage performance, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
noisy, and the music's loud, and the audience are loud too,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so that's contrasting to the Western opera layout and audience
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
interaction between the performer
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and Beijing opera has a typical system called 叫好, meaning
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hurling
If
the
you if you don't if you don't do it, that means he's not good enough, right? The
exactly,
noisier you
exactly. The
are,
noise, yeah,
the
yeah,
noisier you are, that means
right,
that you know
yeah.
the
It's just so,
actors get the
yeah,
encouragement from you.
yeah. It's just it's just similar like a rock music, right? So the
Right,
concert
right.
that the folks are standing up there and screaming and chanting and doing that. So it's very interesting and it's a great experience.
So when you started to do training when you were 6 years old
Mm,
until about
12,
you were 10, 12. What
12, and
happened after that?
after that, that's a cultural revolution. There's only the Beijing opera has been used by Mao Zedong as a political propaganda tool, right?
Propaganda,
So
yeah.
so there's only eight called 样板戏, or so those are
Uh-huh.
political plays that you can only play those. All the traditional stuff being banned.
Uh-huh.
So basically, what I learned from the childhood and to get restricted that you can only start to learn those political plays, political
Mm-hmm.
musics, and settings. Not necessarily those are creations as bad from art perspective, but because its nature is to serve Maoism and to support the communism and political
Mm-hmm.
agenda. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of twisted characters in the play, and
Right.
it's totally political. It's getting very nasty, and uh, basically it's destroying humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a very special historical phase of Chinese cultural history that,
Mm-hmm.
or opera history, Beijing opera or any opera history is being twisted
Mm-hmm.
um, in those 10, 15 years until
Mm-hmm.
in the early 80s, and it started
Mm-hmm.
being when Mao's wife uh,
Mm-hmm.
was got rid of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm. Very
they
sad.
they started reopen up the traditional culture venue. So then the Beijing Opera get revised and revived into May. So
Mm-hmm.
that's truly in the 80s is truly where I start deeply involved in the study the traditional opera plays and
80s.
yeah,
What you were
in the
still in.
late 70 when I was in well that's the 76 is when the Cultural Revolution movement ended, and until 79 when I go to college, and that's the period you allowed to play traditions, but not quite yet. You can only
Mm-hmm.
play this template. Beijing opera is story based. There are thousands of hundreds and thousands of different plays, famous
Mm-hmm.
plays that we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, passing down through the history. So, uh, but only certain are allowed in the 70s to
Mm-hmm.
play, and then in the 80s it starts to fully open it up, and so
Right.
all these historical plays and all these famous players been persecuted during the Cultural Revolution brought
Mm-hmm.
back and to start training, resume training, schooling, and the theater started to open up and to stage regular performances. But it never reached back to the climax before
Mhm.
that political movement. So
Right, right. So what did you do during this period? You say that's where you trained again. Did you
we have a
join a
club.
club? You have a
Yes,
club in the college
in the
or
college,
in
in the college I'm club president too. So I play. So normally you need to have a band first, right? Before
right, the instrumental
you can stage
ensemble.
it. Yeah, yeah. You first get a band put together, and then all the fans or players will start to join. And so that's my college plays. And meanwhile, at the same time, I belong to uh, my dad's club. He has two clubs in Beijing. So he's a the what they call the first chair. It's just there are multiple players, but he was one of the best fan there. So
Mhm.
uh, and in Beijing and Shanghai, those major metros, the club are actually mixed with a lot of uh, professionals as well as amateurs, right?
Mhm.
So the level of there's one club in central Beijing was a very high level with a lot
Mhm.
of with a lot of professionals or retired professionals and famous artists and also very good fans or practitioners. Uh, so like my dad, and it's kind of a true uh, culture saloon, if you may, or opera saloon. We routinely not just
Mhm.
sing and play. We forum a lot, seminar a lot, and kind of exchange ideas. And there's some people even from colleges or universities and those artistic institutions and research institutions join and kind of put a say like a very famous play uh, and tear it into pieces and do analysis and through
Mhm.
history, politics, and humanity and artistic and all these components put together and try to figure out well, it's good, it's great. What makes it great? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm. Mhm.
there's some kind of more formalized research going on
Mhm.
there and accumulation of theoretical studies. So that's the probably primary time I feel very interested into that.
Mhm.
Even I study
Mhm.
economics at college,
Mhm.
but you just feel very involved and very
Mhm.
enriched by listening to those guys talking,
Mhm.
seeing as
Mhm.
real artists in the plane and learn those tricks and
Mhm.
the in-depth
Mhm.
skill set that is
Mhm.
required. And so
Yeah.
it's a very very enriching uh, culture life for myself. Mm.
Mhm.
So I spend a lot of time while other well my generation is actually the draw majority of them are drawn to a different direction, like Deng Lijun of the pop song. So
Yes.
I'm kind of a old school in my friend's eyes. Yeah, well I like a pop song too. I sing those too. I mean they're great, and I don't I cannot resist that. But
Right. But you have
uh,
the tradition they do not have,
yes,
right? You
yes,
have this background that is
right,
in you since you were 5 years old, but they did not have. So
right,
that's the difference. Yeah.
right, right.
So then you came to the United States. You went to a business, doing the business, and then you went to school, and then
Mm,
you had to make ends meet, deliver
mm,
pizza.
mm.
And so when does Chinese Opera Club begin?
Uh,
In Houston,
it,
I mean.
this club was created back it was established back in 1983. So
No,
we're
I'm
talking about
talking about when did you begin to the Chinese Opera?
oh
When
when
did
did I
you
join this?
join? Yeah.
Yes, the almost the second month I landed in Houston.
Really? Even when you were still doing
Yeah,
business,
yeah.
you just need to
Yeah.
find that.
No, it's not. I need to find it. I came out. I don't know what's United States is like regarding Beijing Opera. I heard of it. Dr. Melan Fong visited New York and toured U.S. back in 1930s and made a Beijing Opera a great artistic event in U.S. But since then, I don't know nothing about how this piece of art and landed in U.S. I have no clue, and also with a lot of unknowns, right? So running from a closed door China then to to the free world. So I think this probably is this thing I'm not gonna touch for quite a while. So I didn't even bring the instrument with me
Mhm.
when I landed in Houston. Yes. But 2 months later, my wife took me to say, oh, "Wow, for a whole month you don't have Chinese food, right?" So I eat fried chicken and burgers and all this crap, and of course, and my wife said, "Oh, okay, let's go to Chinatown and to have something called Chinese." So at a restaurant, there's those yellow pages.
Uh-huh.
The yellow page and this is on the desk, and then at that time you don't have no mobile phone, right? The counter
Right, right.
has a wired phone there, and the
Yeah,
folks that's one of the benefits at the restaurant, right? You can pick up a phone and say, hey, I want to borrow this phone and make a phone call.
yes,
Yeah.
right.
So and by the phone is a yellow page, and I was making a phone call to a friend and say, hey, I'm in Houston and we should get together. And while talking, I was flipping this yellow page. At the end, there's a session called community groups, and I see okay, there's a bunch of associations or 同乡会 or okay, so alumni and all these things. At the very end, it's called 国剧社, and in English, this is China Opera Club. I
Mm.
said, what the hell? I said, it's the China Opera Club. So there's a phone number, there's a name, there's a gentleman's name. So I ring it up and okay, so it's actually a bank phone number. A
A what?
YP
A what? A
is a
bank?
bank. Yes, a China bank. It's
Ah.
a called First Texas Bank, First Texas National Bank at that time. 德州第一银行. Okay. And the VP picked up the phone. It happened to be the president of China Opera Club of Houston, and I said, well, sir, what is this club is about, and what is China Opera? Oh, 就是京剧啊. It's Beijing Opera. I said, really? And he said, yeah,
Wow, by accident.
by
That
accident.
you,
And he said, okay, listen to you. You're from Beijing, are you? So because he kind of picked up the dialect
the
of
accent.
the
Yeah.
Chinese, and then the accent, and said so. I said, yeah. Well, I said I actually very into Beijing opera. And he said, okay. This weekend we're gonna have a rehearsal,
Uh-huh.
and can come to and we need some help. We need any help. so so the weekend I came, and they were just trying to stage a public performance, and with a very famous traditional play like a 空城计, which
Hmm.
so and immediately I was put on the stage just at
Mhm.
that moment, and say we need this character that speaks Beijing dialect,
Mhm.
um, and as a supporting character, and we couldn't find anybody who speak Beijing dialect here in Houston, so you're the perfect one. So they costumed me up and put paint the face, and 2 weeks later, I'm on the stage to do the
So, but
performance.
that Beijing accent is the Chinese opera
Part of the
dialect.
Chinese opera dialect that depends on character.
Yeah,
It's a
but
low.
because it's not the typical Mandarin, right?
It's not. It's a more
it's a
like a
theatrical.
theatrical Beijing localized actually.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
so
right.
and that's a perfect fit, no doubt about it, and I'm good at that too. So, but be put it on stage and listen to the the music immediately. That kind of it's kind of my boil blood from inside, you know. So it just you know, it's very expensive to make long distance calls back to China or cross ocean calls back to China.
Right.
It's about I don't know,
I know those days are
one
$3.
dollar a cent, it's several dollar a cent a minute. So,
Right.
but I pick up a phone and called my father and say, I need you to send the instrument down here to Houston. I don't care how you do it. And if, I think it's another several months, and my father find a friend, travel do business traveling to Houston, and brought me three of those violins,
Hmm.
Jinhu. So just from there, and I got involved in the Houston Opera Club, and uh,
Hmm.
I've been the president since what 2009 to today.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there's a well, there's of course another aspect of this is community building and interact culturally with different field, different ethnic groups, and different part of this country. So there's a big network building here in Texas and southern U.S. and also traditional uh, 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 metros for Beijing offshore, like New York, L.A., San Francisco, and Chicago, and all these center town of for Chinese community as well as for Chinese opera. So
I want to ask you this about how does it feel like when you were in the Chinese opera club?
hmm
How does that feel at versus like you were in your work in this different community? I mean, you belong to that community as well. They respect you and all that. And how does that, this is another different community which you meet once a week for 2 hours or 3 hours.
yeah.
How does that feel? How is it different for these two groups?
I have to say, and I personally very amused with American culture and
Very
art.
what?
I'm very amused with Western cultures and the American history, American uh, social build up and the humanities and the traditions and but no matter how you're amazed by those things that you were not born with, what you're born with is always more significant. And
Mhm.
when you, just like I said, I started work and as a delivery boy, and then walking Houston street, and
Mhm.
when the Chinese opera sounds echoed in my ear, it's
Mhm.
totally different. It brings back a lot of things which uh, is unique to this body and to this mind, and in conjunction with what you exposed here, it's totally different culture, right? So you
Mhm.
find the color of and it's even more amazing, uh, right? And and also the culture often kind of become a kind of catalyst for community building.
Mhm.
And I told you that the president of the club is a VP of a bank, is an aged Chinese immigrant from Taiwan.
Mhm.
And a lot of the club member at that time, I think it was just 20 and 30 of them, very passionate uh, people, are mostly from Taiwan or Hong Kong. Not many
Mhm.
from mainland, but they're in the last generation. Very soon they pass away when we approach a new century, and I'm getting age and into my middle age, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden see around that the club is only have 5 or 6 people left.
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
either my age or even older.
Mhm.
Then, as a society, you feel, wow, the loneliness is coming, and
Mhm.
what can I do?
Mhm.
I prayed, and I said, probably best to pray is the the instrument I play. Let me just keep playing it. With only less than 10 members, I still pay for the due on the rehearsal studio, or at the Chinese Community Center. I have to lease that.
You
Very
mean
expensive.
renting a space?
Renting the space,
Mm.
just probably me plus several other people there for the whole afternoon. But I said no, I'm not gonna quit, just because there's no people coming. If I quit, the sound it will be silent,
Mhm.
and there's nobody will hear it no more.
Mhm.
And I just said, that old guy from Taiwan keep playing it until
Mhm.
he draw me in,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
this club will continue. If I
Mhm.
quit playing, I think he will be very sad. He would be very sad.
Mhm.
Um, so I just keep playing. Now
Mhm.
my club has almost 40 people, 40 member paying dues, and
Wow. 40
so
people.
yeah, so that's just amazing, and I think it's culture is a belief, is a faith almost. If you don't have that faith, you well, if you have that faith, you will give back a lot of reward
Mhm.
uh, to your mindset, to mentality. You feel that kind of pleasuring,
Mhm. Mhm.
or entertaining feeling
Mhm.
inside of you. So
Mhm.
that's the significance. I treat this tradition of culture, and of course another thing naturally fall through is much more uh, unique community here with the same uh, interest and the same thing, which has unlimited goal to reach. And you practice this, you can keep. I see a folk from knowing nothing about Beijing opera and join my club, and then
Mhm.
now she or he can pick up an instrument, or he can sing and play the character in full, and can do
Mhm.
costume performance on the stage, even though it's still very amateur. But you just see that kind of passion being built into a human character, and his or hers mentality get transformed into some stage or some scenario that is so self-fulfilling and entertaining,
Mhm.
and that's a good pleasure that I see is happening through this club.
Mhm.
And plus, this thing is always draw attention from other side. Like I don't want to put it so elevate it too much, but it's just in the past 2 decades that I've been in Houston and involved in quite a bit of international festival and all the what's it called uh, we played quite routinely in between 2015 to 2019 to the Houston, actually it's Texas diplomat circle. It's basically all these the general consulars' wives and their significant members, and had this uh, monthly gathering.
Mhm.
So we did the costume shows, play shows, and instrument demonstration. So all these things that kind of amazes that, oh wow, the Chinese people are pretty remote to a lot of other groups of people, but through this they probably can see a glimpse that okay, they have their stuff, uh, which is unique and um, and also beautiful. I think that's what the feedback I got. It was trying to say, hey, you guys have a very rich and beautiful stuff, and of course,
Mhm.
a lot of them are still on the surface, not get into yet, but that's a great start, and that's where I feel kind of self-fulfilling. Uh,
Right.
feel pretty
Mm.
good about it.
Okay. I love you telling me stories. So tell me about the craziest or the most exciting moments in the club, in the Chinese Opera Club.
Uh, um, the most exciting one, uh, I think, there's a multiple there's many events in the community, in the Chinese community or Oriental community, and I think uh, it's it's most uh, I think most celebrated period of time or of each year is truly the Spring Festival. That's a Chinese New Year. So that's the biggest, probably biggest event or celebration of Chinese community here in America. So uh, to be part of that and really, uh, I think that's still quite a kind of most intriguing and exciting moment that you stage a performance and present something that's truly of the neighborhood and truly of the homeland, if you may. So something uh, true, something genuine. That is truly out of the tradition of the Chinese culture, or I think which is commonly recognized by both Taiwan and Hong Kong, and so there's a lot of neighbors, if you may, really join this kind of festivity, and that's still probably the most yes, without yes, I think I have to admit though those traditions of celebrating this new year and the new beginning, the new start of the life, and in a, cyclical kind of event that repeats every year since I got here in the
So
States
is it
for yeah.
any, when you put on the program on stage, is
Mhm.
there any like scary moment, like somebody forgot or something is not there and you have to like to pick it up and this and that. There's something fun or something scary moment
Well,
here.
I think it's actually a battle, if you may. So uh, the the gala every spring festival here in the Chinese community is a great event. It's basically a whole night event and in a theater or in a conference room um, that with a lot of crowds and here to celebrate. And you have a lot of things and singing and dancing and a lot of uh, the form of art, performance art on stage for Chinese, and which is typical uh, uh, for the crowds here, and as well as back in the mainland or home in Taiwan, or some the people celebrate those things, and you have different stages. And but here in Houston, in New York, like in New York, like in LA, and this is probably the biggest the single event in the year, and to get a space for that, I mean, it's a struggling.
Yes,
It's
but is it any moment you remember that was so scary? You thought you're not going to be able to put on people on stage, people forgot the line, and just something, any incidents you can remember that
Well,
was
I
funny.
remember the first one. It was back in probably around the 1995 and 1996. That was the first time we put Peking Opera, Beijing Opera, in that the big show. Um, I remember we were given only 7 minutes, okay, in the whole show of 3 hours. You think about it, the opera, that's the most scary thing and most challenging thing. But I think, well, if I don't do it, probably nobody would do it, would be able to do it, and nobody would see that. And also, in the 7 minute, we have to put uh, the whole new show, a real show, right? So not just the standard singing, not just you need to put a dancing, you need to put performance and dialoguing, and mostly musically, you got to be very uh, striking and very eye-catching and ear-catching, not something dull, not something. Tr Typically for Beijing opera is a storytelling, but in 7 minutes you want to tell a story. That's very challenging and very, very, very exciting. And we picked three players and did one uh, very briefed or a condensed uh, performance with sword fighting, with singing, and with a face painting, with a full costume in 7 or 8 minutes. It ended up as just a thrilling to the audience back in what is the theater name out of U of H, University of Houston, and Allen Theater. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's the name of the theater. And so the first time I staged a performance overseas, uh,
And
and
everybody did well. Nobody forget the costume, or
oh yeah,
nobody forget the
yeah, yeah,
lines.
yeah. Well, when we kind of left the theater and after the show, and we saw a lot of folks, and well, we were still some are still have a face painting on, and trying to shake hands with each other, kind of celebrate that and I was picked up by quite several leaders of the community and say, well, this is something. Uh, Most genuine piece of Chinese tradition and culture or that kind of thing. And even I would say true Americans and here the university. I think the dean of the B school actually was of course my teacher by the time, and I was in the B school, so I invited the faculty and to join and to kind of come here, and they say, "Wow, I didn't teach you that in B school, but it seems to bring in the whole school of uh, uh, tradition and a cultural stuff just in that a very brief thing, and it's amazing. So
Right.
that's the most rewarding moment that I thought I put the effort and in that 7 or 8 minutes with probably a good 2 3 months of practicing, rehearsing, and put things together. Make sure the audio, the video effect, or the visual and audio effect are catching the audience, and I think that labor paid off big time there. So
So
that
your audience is so you also perform outside of Chinatown.
right,
So your audience is to the general American audience. So it's not
yes,
only in the Chinatown. So that's
right,
fantastic.
right,
And their reaction was always really amazed about this culture and what you can do. So
exactly. Hmm.
that's so you're also when your colleagues, when you are working at the show and when you were in your
Hmm.
current company, does
Yeah.
your colleague knows you can do this? Did they come to your show?
Well, not really at those environment, but very soon I think somebody heard our show and approached me. Actually, it was uh, what's a it's not the superintendent of Fort Benning ISD. It's the assistant to the Fort Benning ISD, and approached me and say, hey, our high school has all kinds of club and a culture club, right? So from all ethnic groups, and I heard of your show. Well, that's many years after we have multiple shows, and even at Rice University, we had a we had the gala and performance for the Chinese Student Association or Asian Student Association or something like that, and we do those things. That's a kind of word spread around, and so the foreign eyes, the kind of touched base with me and saying, hey, you want to do a seminar and to kind of promote this kind of thing through our Asian Culture Club, say at Clemens High School or Highland Cullen High School. What else? Dulles High School. So that's those moments that I see a good chance to kind of embed some seeds there, and for at least it's showing that what we're doing, what this club is doing, and there's a difference there. There's
Mhm.
diversity there
How about your
within.
colleagues, your co-workers? Have they
Right.
seen your colleagues right now? Have they seen it?
Oh, yes. Actually, I have a colleague. I have quite several colleagues that are musicians, and they do have their own club, and some in jazz and some in pop music. And I have a very my former boss is a bass guitar player in Madison, Wisconsin, and uh, so I made quite several trips just go there to meet him, and of course he's nice enough and say he try to arrange those work travels and for me, and so just uh, well set up some projects that require me to be on site in Madison. Uh, then join him to show me his club and also ask me to bring the instrument and show him. And he saw some of the videos that our performance. He was very interested. Although Madison is a town that don't have a whole lot of Oriental people, but you just see that kind of a interaction musically is amazing, and I don't quite understand his stuff. He didn't quite understand my stuff. But we're sitting all in the club, and I play that sound. Actually, with some audience in there, I just heard screaming out of the audience. Wow! It's just the minute I open up a stream play, uh, just wow, this sounds. And somebody approached me and said, "Hey, you sound like a trumpet." I said, "Really?" Well, I never thought that way, but I thought this string instrument can have similar high pitch like a trumpet. Uh, so uh, those
Mhm.
are the some of the excitement of the contact. And I have another friend, colleague actually. His name is Dennis, and he plays. He's a drummer at Dallas, Fort Worth, Dallas, and he has he's a band member, and actually this COVID-19 brought us a lot closer. We do a lot of Zoom meeting and just showing each other's play and an instrument. So that's really great fun. And even though it's still hard to bridge a lot of the music language here, right? So, Beijing opera is very, very uh, Oriental unique. So um, to them, I mean, so, but uh, they all expressed that kind of excitement of the
Right.
impact of the music, and I'm amazed at how they can accept this thing.
Mhm.
So
Do you think?
I often feel afraid that this may scare somebody. My music may scare somebody, but to the contrary, that it was taken in. So that kind of recall that Dr. Mei Fang, like 70, 80 years back, and visit New York and make that kind of a disturbance, if you may, or excitement of appreciation of this kind of art form.
So when you perform or practice the Chinese opera in China,
Mhm.
it's different from when you perform it here,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Well,
That's
what's the difference? Like when you were in China, when you perform, seems to be nothing big deal because people practice there,
right.
right?
Right.
But here it's because you're different and people appreciate more. So did I mean, I want to hear how you feel differently. That you feel
Well,
in
all these events I
Chinese.
talked about earlier, yes, it brings the impact once at a time. Okay, so it's just to keep accumulating that, make me believe that you you should not feel too awkward about showing your culture uh, uh, the genuine character or characteristic of your culture or your tradition and your art form, and which is often you thought it, well, I just believe it's much easier than I thought it was uh, to really bridge over or to messaging out through the music notes or the performance on the stage to foreign audience. That I really been the first time is pretty scary, to see with uh, with a local and American audience and watching this thing. And so it's amazing.
Mhm.
Uh,
That
I
means
don't, yeah.
there must be some challenge too,
Oh
right?
yeah, yes. And
And as rewarding it is, there's a lot of challenges too.
there's a lot of challenges.
Tell
And
me,
like
tell me a couple of them.
the biggest challenge is it's a performance art. It's a stage art, a performance, right? So it's like an opera. You have stories. If you cannot convey the story in the local language, and the local audience will not get it. And yeah, they may get strike. They may get hit by the musical piece of it, and it's strange enough. But if you don't bring in the story into it, and they will not appreciate the
How do you
performance
resolve
as a
that?
whole. Well, translation is a big hard
It's
work.
like, do you have a super title?
Yes, I do have a most of the time we have a script projection and when the story progress, and most likely, well, I did most of it myself, and some of my club members are pretty good at the English and Chinese translations and with a pretty good
Mhm.
I did most of part of this and then do a lot of translations there and try to make it understandable and appreciable and more like in uh, well um, my English is still Chinglish, but I tried my best, and sometimes get to some professional script reader and to help me to fine tune those. But um, music is expensive. Well, artistic work are expensive, and you need a time and you need a resource to do that. So that's challenging, really. So
What other
if
challenges you have?
well, I would be able to hire better scripter or translators, and also uh, like a presentation in the more like 3D way. So with the musical explanations, with the lyric explanations, with what the actor is singing, and what the the background stories, and also when you print out the brochure and you laid out all these subtracts or briefings of those stories, and let the foreign audience really start to see all these developments of stories, and then that becomes meaningful at the end. I think that's my experience and also my struggle. So how do you, if it's not a native audience, to to see our performance, and we often struggle. So who are the target audience? That's is like we plan to we have a 2019 year-end plan at the Miller Center theater with all the, so I spent a lot, but it was canceled due to the COVID. So, but my plan was really to really have a big screen projection of the whole development of the stories and the lyrics and the explanations, and so just to draw much wider audience into this and make sure they are not seeing something totally foreign and without understanding what is the story. So uh, that is, if any challenge is to bridge across this thing better with more effectiveness. That thing, I think that's the one big challenge that I face.
What about other things like practicing to rehearsal together and members and
Oh,
um,
that's obviously very tough, and we're hobby based, and so uh, you will see member come and go, and a good member, and then you see good players, the bass players, so the erhu players, or the drummers left, and then it almost make your uh, totally operationable. So um, it's always my focus to recruit um, players or the hobbyists and within the club. So we have a multiple fill-ins for the same position. So to keep one full band at least. That's the musical challenge, right? So if you don't have the band, you have no performance. Uh, so um, yeah,
How many
I think
members do you have right now?
we got about 35 to 40-ish long-term members, and meaning they're regular join the club activities and practices weekly, and also paid dues.
So
That's important.
each Sunday, about 35 people come practice.
It's a routine before. Now we're picking up a little bit more prior COVID-19, and we have about routinely you will see 25 to 30-ish and a company, and that's very crowded already.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So, but you normally would have at least 10 member of the band there. So more than two-thirds of them, let's say 15 to 25 people are singing. So that is norm of how our club operates, right? So people coming in, A is for the fun and for their own hobby and for their own practice and rehearsal and improvement. And B, it's always the goal of this artist go on the stage
Mhm.
and do the real performances and do a whole play, do a whole story, and do a whole opera. And so that is the ultimate goal, and that drives a lot of members in here. That's what me as a leader, and typically spend a lot of energy to nurture and to help to facilitate, at least keep that
Mhm.
fun going, right? So
Mhm. How do you identify yourself? Do you identify yourself as Chinese or American or Chinese American? How do you
I
identify yourself?
I identify myself as more American than Chinese. Well, of course, I'm the citizen of the country, and no doubt about it that the minute I swear in, I swore myself in, I took it seriously, and
Mhm.
I took a lot of thoughts, and and I cannot say that I don't have no struggle at all. So I
Can
do,
you
and as a
you
being a Chinese.
feel comfortable to talk about it? You say you cannot say you don't have no struggle, doesn't have struggle. Can you tell me a little bit about what kind of struggle you have? How do you embrace that identity?
Uh, Well, I think like most of Oriental countries or particular Chinese has a very strong attributes of their attribute back to their origin and to the roots, if you may. Uh, but what the struggle is that you do have this something called American culture that which is embedded with a lot of different things that in your root culture you don't see, right? Say personality, uh, personal characteristics, and freedom, and most importantly, freedom of thoughts or ideas. That's what I feel was the initial drive for me uh, to leave uh, where I was born and come over here. And so I never shy away from saying that's a totally transformation of my vision and my view of what is a true person in this world disregard its nationality, and that's the value. And same thing like we perform Beijing opera here. That's the very artistic stuff. Does it involve nationality? Obviously, it does. But does that contradict to my choice of nationality? No, it doesn't. I still believe culturally I'm a Chinese.
Mhm.
But you've won you've I'm asked, no, no, what what country I belong to? I belong here because
Mhm.
I took my vow very seriously. And
Mhm.
I took, well, even if like Taiwan seems or many other countries allow the double nationality or double citizenship, I wouldn't even consider that. That's not the matter. Is the what you take as your land of home.
Mhm.
That's important. That you dedicate yourself to the lifestyle, to the richness of the soil. I'm not saying that China is not a great land. It's a great land. I can spend my rest of life there too as a guest. I can be living there very comfortably, and but I have to say I'll be much more comfortable living here. Um,
Have you been back to China since?
and almost every year
Mhm.
I send my kids back, and also through my church I do church mission back in China, Asia, and Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Japan. And our church has a many mission trips, and that I
Mhm.
took my kids to or encourage them to serve in those areas. And so again, that's another side of the story of a faith, and I don't. Um, I don't feel any conflict. I can incorporate all these things together and just feel more enriched from each side. You know, faith, your religion, and your cultural background, and your spirit of settlements. Okay, I feel myself more like a cowboy, kind of wandering around this little piece of land, but really truly enjoyed it.
Identity-wise, you see yourself American, not even Chinese American.
No, well,
American.
well, that's very vague. I mean, uh, not a very. If you have to choose a balance here,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I would take that term. Okay,
Which,
Chinese American, but at the end you're American. That's
yes.
how I read that two English word, Chinese American.
Well, even the
Well,
people,
the first one is only saying that you were born there, but
oh
you
no,
are part
even
of the.
people who were born here, a Chinese American born, they would still identify themselves as Chinese American.
I
So,
really don't know. I really don't know how my kids identify themselves, and they, in their eyes, I think uh, their faith kind of helped them to identify more clearly who are they and where they want to belong. And but it's truly now the human history comes to this stage, really where you're from and where you're born become much less relevant to your
mhm,
citizenship. And yeah, I know there can be a very big debate out there.
mhm,
I I
mhm.
I can foresee that. I mean, I actually daily experience that um, in our own community. Okay, so
Experience what? Can you explain?
well, just like you said, that term Chinese American, you got a Chinese, you got American, and there's two poles there, right? So it can be closer, being a one, you can be dragged along to the two extremes. And so, hey, I live here, I'm Chinese, or I live right here, I'm American.
Mhm,
So that's the difference. I can only speak for myself. That's how I feel. I think just listen to my saying this for a native born, particularly back in that age of Chinese history, and to say this, what I just said, is already a big jump out of the normal box of thinking, you know.
Mm,
So I may offend somebody, uh,
mm.
but I don't care really. What I'm saying is just for myself. You see, just say this is not a normal thinking or normal mentality of a typical
From what?
mainlander.
Oh, from Mainlander, I see. Okay,
Yes, for mainlander, this is from what my past is, and I wouldn't dare to say, "Hey, this is representing myself."
I see.
No, you're represented by the king, or you're represented by the rulers,
Mhm.
right? So that's called official. Uh, Even today, I think it's still pretty much that in that mentality. I would never give up anything to go back there. I mean, I wouldn't never trade anything for that. Well, I mean, that's really chaos. That's a really nightmare to go back.
Mhm, mhm.
All I'm saying is that uh, what I say
You,
is
you
what I
feel
say.
you
That's a
feel
transformation.
it's you feel totally involved in this country and totally
I
feel
do.
part of
I
this, belonging to this country. And do you have any experience of discrimination? The people didn't think, like you said, one time people said, go back to your own country.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you have those kind of experience?
I
And
don't I don't I don't I don't really think too much of it and during the past the several years, and particularly the political cycle here, that the right or left and black and white and all these heebie-jeebies. And I think if you are a people with a spirit of appreciation rather than bigotry or complaining or whining,
Mhm,
and focus on enriching yourself, you cannot appreciate less about America than anywhere else in this globe you can find. I mean, that is my feeling. Okay, that is what made me come down, facing some of the even hatred, right? So, uh, I think this past 200 years or two some hundred years of this, the history of this land proves that tolerance and forgiveness is the foundation of this society.
mhm,
And that's the mainstream. If you're talking about the mainstream, it's not about your color. It's about what you believe in, right? You believe in care. You believe in forgiveness, and you believe in, I don't know, lack of a better term, and it's just quote the Bible says, and make your enemy, love your enemy. That's what Jesus does, right? So, um, sorry, I don't want to try to be pollute this conversation with a religion belief, but I think that's what I personally believe is the
mhm.
foundation of the culture of this land, which
Okay.
I appreciate very, very much.
Now,
Or
can you tell me another story of you just mentioned tolerance and
mhm,
forgiving.
right.
Can you tell me another story after you establish yourself, you're professional, making good money? Can
Mhm.
you tell me another story of that experience that, similarly to the your pizza deliverable story? Can you imagine? Can you, is there any story that you remember?
Uh, how- uh, I think it's different, right? In the community you live versus the place you work or you make your living uh, or through. To me, make a living is a vehicle or is a method, but truly enjoy your neighborhood is another. So I mostly find in the when you pursue your career, and you will see all kinds of social treatment. That's unavoidable. That's inevitable, almost. That being a minority Uh, I think it's you call it discrimination, that's okay. I can say that's a very accurate description, but it's out of human nature, right? So majority have that kind of comfort. So you look back before male and female, uh, or women's right started kind of rise from the horizon into this is social uh, binocular that it becomes a focus of the stuff, and you will see this. This is very natural because men are dominating majority in the workplace, all these fields in the leadership and all that. So now you just see this balance has start coming in, and through the progression of the society and through the progression of the civilization. I think that's a I think I think America gives the best shot in the human history that created this nurturing ground for that kind of equality. And of course, yeah, a lot of people are always looking. I I cannot call that greed, but it's always looking for more, right? So and sometimes it flips and they say over overly emphasize that can hurt, that can be hurting. But what my point is that in my working experiences, there's multiple events that I fully kind of self-examine as I deserve this progressing or promotion and to a certain goal, but it didn't fall through, and some accidental replacement and make me feel hurting. If you know what I'm saying, that yeah, it's there's multiple elements into this. That basically say alumni and same race and racial. I cannot deny that. That's a factor into it, and that stopped me at that moment, and that made me feel very painful. Okay, my well, I feel insulted.
Yeah.
I cannot I can prove that I'm a I'm a better qualified candidate or anything, and given that, and now I have my own kids and go into U.S. college system, and the barrier is different on race base, right? So, uh, am I thinking about that? I do. I complain about that? I do. But that really impact how I educate my kids, how I help them or facilitate them to progress, and how do I coach them to mitigate this kind of a pressure, right? So that's important. I think instead of showing my kids the complaint and the bigotry and the sense of being treated unfairly is not important. What's
No.
important is to how you get around it. How do you, if you want to fight, how do you effectively fight it? Or how do you uh, kind of develop a kind of social strength on that? So that kind of work around that. I volunteer for community leadership, right? So like a HOA and neighborhood representative. I support my wife to be the representatives and try to create a lot of community, uh, kind of union and a kind of a common ground uh, to at least as a place that as a neighbor and we can talk to each other or can communicate, set up this channel of communication. I think those through those I show my kids, and if you want to lead and you want to impact, that is a way to do it. Instead of here I tweet this bad story, I cry, I yell, and confront directly with during the event. I think it's healthier to
Mhm.
be involved, even in the other side of the community. And so when we send the kids to do so warm Christmas lunch and for poor neighborhood, that's where you see the true blurry of racial boundary and class boundary, rich and poor, black and white, or yellow and black, that becomes at least blurred in
Mhm.
kids' eyes, in my eyes. I feel it, I sense it. So that's uh, that's how I see, uh, at least it's my way to effectively and less emotionally deal with
Mhm.
uh, those
Are
kind of
your
incidents.
kids politically active?
They vote. Uh, they vote against my will. So uh, they are socially active at
But
college.
you telling them that instead of sitting there and complain, you do something, be a leader, right?
Right, be a leader, be action, be
Right.
taking action, and it's more important than you just.
So
Uh,
do they take your advice and become a strong leader? Um,
I hope they will, but
Not yet.
well, young people are different. I mean, particular through adolescence and through teenagers and then
Mhm.
into uh,
One of
more.
your kids is older, right? One of your kids is,
Yeah, one of my kids are already graduated and work and continuing education, work and study, and so he's pursuing. Well, you see that they have the leisure, not like um, my career. I have no choice, and then back in mainland, and you don't have no choice, right? So to choose what you do and uh, what uh, what future you can plan out. But here in the States, their generations are different.
Mhm.
That's another thing I appreciate, right? So it benefited my next generation. They have three choices and say, I'm computer analyst today, and tomorrow I want to be a doctor. Like you can,
Mhm.
but it's unthinkable. It was
Mhm.
unthinkable in my young time. So,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that's a great benefit, and I just see sometimes well, even sometimes I'm unhappy about they squander this kind of privilege, but I think this is a complete new era of human history, and it's always like that. And the next generation will progress and will keep going, and no
Right.
matter. So, uh,
I want to ask you, what do you think of the relationship between Taiwan and China?
oh, I think um, that idea has a great transformation. That's all because of my idea toward Taiwan changed a lot. And as a mainlander, before I came here, that's an enemy territory. Okay, we're gonna, or then that's
Likewise, that's how we think about you,
the same thing. Yeah, right. So we're gonna kill you, and you.
right? We're gonna take you.
So that's a terrible part of any civil war, right? So you create enemies. That's what I hate most. And after I came here and look at, the- well, my club was just a full of two sides of people,
Mhm.
and I'm being there, and I just see there are different attitudes and different emotion there, and it depends on where you're from. And we do have called 本省人 who are the escapees from mainland to the island, right? So
Mhm.
pretty much come with the nationalist government, and so
Green parties and blue parties.
exactly. So, uh, but I do believe from my own experience that social environment for any individual is a choice, should be a choice. That is the basic humanity.
Mhm.
You should not be ruled by somebody politically. It
Mhm.
should not be driven by any ideology
Mhm.
or any philosophy system or
Mhm.
any beliefs. Even religion should not govern that. A people should have a choice of where he belongs to and where his origin is, and that's totally based on social experience of generations and truly what you believe in, what you cherish, what you value most. That is people's choice. That's part of the humanity and the human rights, and there's no doubt about it. And any side, no matter big the size of the population, of the land, the mass, that doesn't matter,
Mhm.
right? That's supreme uh, point of the humanity concept here, not just in English, and the traditional Chinese philosophy has all embedded this, but too bad it's been muddied with the royal uh, or feudalist um, governance that has been kind of a key line of the Chinese history. So that is where I see the conflict is. I would really cherish for the Chinese people's choice if they want to really be independent.
Mhm.
This is a very very different. It would be a very different statement 20 years back.
Mhm. Well,
If
it's
you
like
ask
in
me
peace.
20 years, if you ask me 20 years back, I would say, hey, downtown one, and what we're gonna take it over. But so
Some people think that, some people think that Chinese democracy cannot be part of it. It shouldn't be Chinese political direction,
right,
right? But
right,
if you look at Taiwan, it's totally democracy, a democratic country, and so
right,
it works really well. So it's not true
right,
that the communists belong
right.
to. It's only good for. No, it's not true.
It's
So.
it's it's proved that repeatedly in human history that one dominance of ideology or religion belief or political thoughts or philosophy can be very suppressing and creates a human tragedy and just uh, smash down or really dwell upon one one humanity or one thoughts of a belief versus another. So that's not fair.
Mhm,
So um, as a being as a human being created equally and that is the fundamental. So that's why I fully believe American culture and American beliefs or American dreams is totally based on that belief.
mhm,
Then that is what so-called a modern democracy. At
mhm,
least before we all die. Well, after we all die, who knows what this human being society will become. But as long as we live in this age, I think the most advanced, most rationalized humanity definition is on this land. That's my belief.
mhm.
So I think,
One time I was in China. I took a taxi. For some reason, we talk about if China should take
uh-huh.
over Taiwan.
Hmm.
I usually do not go into that direction with a taxi driver. And the taxi driver started talking about it. And he said, oh, of course, the two countries should be united, but Taiwan should take over China because we want freedom.
Well, I would say there's only one piece. Well, I always argue with the friends and folks back there in Beijing or Shanghai, and well, I'm talking about the people, so-called intellectuals, right? So they're educated and they know. Um, they're mostly Western educated, so students finish degree and then go back to China and have their career there, and officials and all these my same age people, and there are a lot of nationalism. Still, the sentiment of nationalism and say, okay, Taiwan is a part of China. I think um, you can argue that, but on top of that, the one concept nobody can argue with me is that is the society or is the motherland more important than the individual?
Mhm.
Nobody, well, with that question, normally will follow with the silence. Either in the WeChat this debate or just I went back and traveled back and talked to them. I said, hey, ask yourself, is yourself more important than this town?
Mhm. Well,
Well,
you are.
folks at first they say, whoa, I'll sacrifice with my country and all this political scum, so brainwash and all that kind of stuff. I was like that 20, 30 back, 30, 40 years back when I was a kid. I was brainwashed and I was chanting those slogans in the same way. I understand that, but it doesn't prove they're right. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're definitely wrong. So, uh,
You are a true American. You believe in the freedom because you've been here for so long, you really have brainwashed by America. Believe in freedom, believing to individual. So you are a true American.
yeah, they can call me that. You're deadly brainwashed by the American dream, and well, I admit that. That's okay. Uh, but I the difference is that I was a brainwashed once. Now I was brainwashed again. I at least I know comparison. I know how to compare. That is difference. You guys don't know. You only watched it once. You haven't been watched it twice yet. So, and that makes the difference, doesn't it? So, uh, I
Oh,
think, yeah, well, this is, sorry, sorry, Professor, I was a little off a tangent here. That's too much about myself. Truly,
oh
uh,
no, no, this is about you. This is absolutely about you. I want
so,
to ask you,
mm.
what are your hopes for the Chinese Opera Club?
Oh, that's a tough question.
It's,
I think,
you're just talking, right? You can dream.
yeah,
I know it takes a lot.
I have to admit I'm getting old, and when you're getting old, approaching retirement, and you will think about, okay, is this a part of uh, your emotion, uh, your passion, and how long you're gonna carry it? My predecessor really died on shift, you know, um,
Diane, what?
meaning that he dies as a president, and he didn't retire out of this club president. It's
See.
just at the time that we all say, okay, um, nobody ever say you're old enough to be a leader here. So pretty much. So uh, I think that's a great honor, you know. So you think about it that you have a group of people that like to sit around you and let you to set the tone and let you to say help to well a lot of work, a lot of service, if you may. In my
Absolutely.
eyes, that's just service, but truly my services are respected, and that I will. As long as I was voted off, and I would keep it. So be selfish. I enjoy a lot, and then I spend a lot, and I made a lot of effort. Uh, I feel pride of it, and I'll continue with that. That's kind of a uh, part of my life, and I'll continue to do that. And whatever we do, like this new channel that opened with your help, um, to 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 certain extent and to expand it and to other community or mainstream or whatever way that we can demonstrate ourselves a little bit more and introduce this unique culture product, if you may, in the market. So that's fun. That's
Do you have anything um, more concrete, like you're gonna have more members or more audience and more performances and all? You
we're
have
facing or I do statistics too, and like I described earlier, I mean last time about the crisis that we only have 4 or 5 people left, and the last generation just gone. Um, most of the Taiwanese or Hong Kongese, they're just gone, and um, now my same age and started picking up this thing and join the club and find the fun in there to create this kind of a to nurturing this kind of a hobby and this kind of a cultural environment is very tough, and we're not popular, no doubt about it, in young, particularly in younger generation, and we have our youngest like in his 30s, or that's the youngest, and I also tried to open a school for opera training for little young kids from there, but it didn't end. Well, I had a couple of students, and but there's just a lot of other interests there. This thing is way too boring or unattractive to young kids. I have to admit that these this artistic format like opera, Beijing opera is like symphony. All these classical stuff has started fading away from the younger generation as populist artistic format. Uh, but to what I another thing I came to United States I'd appreciate most is their museum system.
Mhm.
My hobby to travel across this country, no matter how small the town is, there's a museum there.
Right.
Yeah, just like you go to Freeport, there's a Marine Museum, and just talking about how Freeport, this this is a town, small town of Texas, and uh, how they started it from a small fishing village, and well, that's history. That's a preservation.
Mhm.
This reserve. Um, this is part of the young culture of America that actually give Beijing opera a chance to preserve on this land. You think about it. Yes,
Mhm.
like the costume shows, the that we plan out, and um, those things are very unique. And
Mhm.
one day I probably will open a really, if I find enough funding, and I'll open up a Beijing Opera Museum here.
Wow.
Just, uh, just to, well, actually, I have a very good personal depot, and I bought my mom the house. There, there are 4 bedrooms, and then the three of them are storage actually, just for all the costumes and all the uh, instruments and all the stage settings,
Mhm.
audio equipment, all
Mhm.
these things. I think at a certain point, um, I'll try to find a more formal place to demonstrate or exhibit. Uh, well, I don't know. Whoever might be interested, that is a good feedback uh, to my to part of my soul that I have the passion for.
I heard a story of you purchase a bunch of, use your own funding purchase these
Yeah.
costumes. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. I think there's yeah, I think back in 2016, and I, well, now costume is part of, and costume and the system of costume. Let's a little bit more complicated. Uh, it's a uh, different settings for different characters, the costume requirement, as well as the facial decoration and the visual presentation, particular for female characters, those are very complicated system.
Mhm.
Involve uh, a, a jewelry decorations and helmets and head wearings, and it's either made of silver or gold or real diamonds in a lot of cases, real precious stones sometimes, and so those things are very traditional art craft skills that are being lost back in China. So maintain those is like maintain paintings or historical paintings or artistic pieces. It's the same thing, and somebody got to retain it, and somebody have to collect it. And I'm kind of gradually growing into that. I said, well, now I'm financially more capable.
Mhm.
If I want to collect anything, I'm not gonna collect a 1917's Ford uh, truck or something. I'll probably will spend same amount of money to collect a set. I may one day go back to mainland to shop for uh, or treasure hunt
Mhm.
in the market for those kind of things. Those are if yeah, this is those are some of the goals that I have in my mind and
Mhm.
I keep spending time on. Um, to
Mhm.
to do. And those, well, just I think all in all, is in my lifetime to leave some trace of this unique art form here on this land. It's okay. I
Mhm.
mean, it's something done, something.
Mhm.
Who cares? My kids probably don't care, but if I uh, if I can set up a museum one day or with the help of a group of people, yeah, that would be great.
Mhm.
Feel good and
Yeah. Okay. Um, do you have any else you want to add?
no, I'm good. I mean, I'm a little talkative, and when I talk about myself,
No, no, no,
so
no, 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 no. I
uh,
take up a lot of your time. It's 9 p.m.
yeah,
And it's you had a long day, so thank you
yeah,
so much
no
for
problem.
spending time.
It's a
And
pleasure.
yeah, so I think we're good for today. And if
Mm,
we need more, we'll come back to you
yeah,
again. You know?
all the time, Professor Chen, and it's my pleasure, really. It's much appreciated that you give me
Thank
this
you.
time and give me this channel at least, and let me speak out and to show our club and just show this culture piece. That's great. Feel good. Thanks.
Thank you.